next panel, which is about election meddling. Election meddling takes many, many forms: direct, indirect, disinformation, and I think we have a great panel assembled to hear about how to identify it, combat it, and other strategies for coping with it. Our speakers are Yana Yolotaryova, who is the manager of communications for the civil network of OPORA, who arrived here from Kiev very recently. Septimius Parvu, who is an electoral and active citizenship expert from Expert Forum, based in Bucharest. Vujo Ilić, who is a research and policy advisor from CRTA, and a research fellow at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory at the University of Belgrade. And they will be moderated by Tamara Branković, who is the Deputy Program Director of CRTA. Please come to the stage as your seats are being meticulously rearranged.
We have an extra
somebody meddled with the numbers.
Oh.
Our chairs were meddled with.
Okay,
No one wants to sit next to me.
As it is.
That's good. Good. Okay, so I guess that we can start. And when we were preparing the panel, we actually started from the context in which we talk a lot about foreign interference in democracy. But we feel that we don't talk a lot yet about foreign interference in elections, whether from internal or from external actors. And that's the case, at least for Serbia. And here at the panel, I have the pleasure to talk with election observers. So we are all election observers for quite some time in Ukraine, in Romania, as well as in Serbia. And we would like now to go through this first round of questions that I would like to start from Septimius. And basically, given the fact that you observed elections in so many countries in Europe, what we would like to explore first with you is how could you advise us on how can we recognize that the foreign interference is taking place when we think we are actually observing one?
So, firstly, I think there are so many forms of interference. Sometimes you can find them individually, sometimes they are mixed. And I would not only refer to the foreign interference. I mean, of course, sometimes globally this seems to be more pregnant, but in the sense that you see I don't know, the Russian interference, the Chinese interference, but sometimes the national interference in elections might be even worse, or a combination of them all, of both of these types actually could be the worst of them all. First of all, I would very briefly define what we can think of when we speak about interference. Firstly, of course, we discuss about disinformation. We have this, let's say, technical cybersecurity side of interference. We can have, for example, interference through buying influence, buying politicians who may support a foreign cause or a political party which may support a foreign cause. And there are also other many types, including through fake observers, because this is a practice in the sense that you send some international observers with codes, and basically they are not observing what's really happening, but it's more of a fake observation. But probably what's one of the most worrying is the first one, and probably this is the hardest to see, the disinformation, the campaigns, which also can have a lot of versions from, I know, phishing campaigns, through fake accounts, and basically what we see in most of EU countries, I think at this point, or in Europe, not just maybe also OSCE spaces, that authorities are very often not prepared for seeing what's disinformation or not, from different reasons. either from lack of capacity, and the issue is usually the bad people who are doing this are more prepared than the authorities. So it's always reactive. And maybe even with us, which are civil society organizations which observe are sometimes caught unprepared of new techniques which are being brought to the election market. And I think one of the most worrying trends, of course, we had all these kind of issues and all these kind of scandals with Cambridge Analytica. But we had, for example, in Brazil, where data was used illegally through Facebook and WhatsApp groups or Telegram. So there are tons of examples. But what I see worrying in the recent time, and we just have the Slovak elections, and I think one of the trends which might be even harder to identify is using deep fakes or using AI for transmitting fake messages. And there were two examples in the recent Slovak elections, in the sense that the voice of one of the main opposition leaders was falsified, and the message was that he was buying votes from the Roma community, and the other was that he was going to make beer more expensive, which it might be a very... But I think this is one of the main purposes of these kind of campaigns,
Yes.
to raise discontent and to raise the fury of the public.
Yes, of course. And if I may just reflect from the Serbian experience, and when we are talking about the artificial intelligence use, we recently actually witnessed the situation where the artificial intelligence was used to alter opposition leaders and to actually prepare a propaganda material that was published at one of the national TV channels that we have here in Serbia. We are so far actually still waiting for any kind of institutional response. So I think that our institutions are as well unprepared, or maybe they don't want to get prepared for these kinds of new threats and new technology abuse, I would say. But I would like to skip to Yana. And given the fact that OPORA did a really tremendous job when it comes to advocating for free and fair elections in Ukraine, of course, before the full-scale Russian invasion, could you maybe share some of the experiences which you witnessed during your advocacy, observation activities that you undertook? And could you just share the experience on from where this malign interference was coming from the government-organized or non-government organized activities that aim to manipulate the election outcome?
Okay. Thank you, Tamara. First of all, I would like to say that we are here on security conference and talking about safety. That means that election is also about security. I'm from Ukraine. I represent here in Vujo. You said that you have a lot of experience in protection and struggle for free and fair election. Before we thought that election security means defense of human rights, equal rights for everyone, for fair and free choice, without any manipulation. Now we understand that it's something bigger. Fair election is about safety of state. It's about pro-national government. It's about physical safety also, and ability to protect your land. And now about your question. I won't touch that period, about 10 years of Ukrainian independence, which history shows has a lot of cases of government manipulation with election. To tell the truth, our organization began with the struggle of fair election during the president election in 2005. You all know about the Orange Revolution. But since 2015, elections in Ukraine are organized, fair, and democratic. But it doesn't mean that we hadn't any problem. Of course, we had especially authority manipulation on the local level with, municipal media and administrative resource. I would like to tell you our experience in one of the last elections that happened in Ukraine before full-scale invasion, major election in Kharkiv. One of the candidates, Igor Terehov, he was a mayor of the city of the Kharkiv City Council, and he had full monopoly on the municipal media and its Facebook pages, of course, too. They highlight here activities with a good point, but didn't notice others candidate or only criticize them. Even it was very interesting election because some local commission changed the results of it, but no one would like to understand it. And when OPORA published information that the results is not fair, those media, municipal and 7 Facebook coordinated pages began disinformation campaign for our organization. That's why we should do something with such old thing as administrative resource, but not not decided how to do with it. What else?
If I may, maybe we can go in another round of questions when it comes to these channels and other activities which you were noticing. But I would like to go now to Vujo and to ask this from our experience as election observers and from the whole point of independent civic election observation of the elections. From our perspective, basically, it seems that we always, the purpose of our existence is actually to support the trust in the elections, in the election outcomes, but also to say, based on credible information, whether there were some attempts to manipulate these outcomes. But it seems that now this interference in the elections became rather a new topic for many countries in the world nowadays. And while this combating manipulation with elections is not strange to Ukraine or to us in Serbia and the Balkans, in the countries which have the similar developing patterns, but could you tell us more about what changed in the meantime and how information manipulation in elections actually became a topic that we now can all basically relate to? How it became relevant to the world.
I think you said it well. You said that it became a new topic, and I think that's the case. Some things have changed, and some things have remained the same. And the thing that remained the same is there is interference in the electoral process. Since we had modern elections, we always had some form of interference. There's a book by author called Dov Levin, published 2 years ago. He analyzes the period from the Second World War to the year 2000, and he analyzes 117 cases of foreign interference in electoral process, which were done mostly by United States, Soviet Union, Russia, and so on. And so it has always been around. What happened is that information manipulation has become more prominent, and as Septimius already mentioned, 2016 and the scandal with Cambridge Analytica and US election actually caught people off guard, that these things happen and that they can happen everywhere. So what has changed? But certainly something has changed, and I think that's the environment in which elections take place. And we can see at least 4 factors that have changed in the last 15 to 20 years. So one of them is the crisis of what we call legacy media. I think that the fact that we call them legacy media talks a lot about the sustainability of the economic model. of newspapers, radio, TV, and so on. And they have been challenged by several things, the global economic crisis and also the ascent of internet. But internet wasn't enough by itself. There is also an ascent of social media, which happened in the last 10 or 15 years, which means that we got rid of the gatekeepers, the algorithms took over, and I mean, as already mentioned now, the generative AI is becoming much more prominent. So that's two factors. The third factor is really the crisis of democracy and a wave of autocratization that has been raging for the last 10 or 15 years, in which countries that we call hybrid regimes or competitive authoritarianism, the authoritarians are holding in elections, but they're trying to manipulate the outcomes in the process. That's the third factor. And the fourth factor is the rise of illiberal actors, which now have both the capacity and the audacity to interfere in elections worldwide. And so when we look at our region, when you look at Central and Eastern Europe, we can see that these processes, I mean, there's a lot of endogeneity happening. Like, I don't know what is the cause of what, but they all reinforce each other. We see a very prominent increase in interference in elections since 2008 or 2009. And when we look at data, for instance, the Varieties of Democracy project has several data sets that point in this direction. When we look at foreign dissemination of false information, government dissemination of false information, and political party dissemination of false. When we look at Romania and Ukraine and Serbia, there are some outliers, but pretty much since 2010, it's been on an increase. And so the point that I would make here is that we can't see election interference outside of the context of information manipulation that happens in between the elections. So it's the same actors that are manipulating or spreading false information, in the 3 or 2 years between the elections. They just have a field day on election day. I would just remind the audience of the case in Serbia, where basically the date of calling an election is in itself, has been in the last 2 years, filled with disinformation. So it's been spreading through the public space. But that also means that agents or actors that are combating disinformation are basically on the same job. So election observers, which are obviously, like, we are dealing with the elections, we basically have the same job as the media and the fact checkers, which are doing the same thing in between electoral circles, which I think is a topic that we can maybe continue on later, but there's lots of work on this. And maybe the point is the changes are structural. This is not going to go away. This is going to stay with us for as long as we can see.
Yes, of course. And I mean, what maybe frightens us the most is when this manipulation starts to become, or will start becoming part of institutional practices, of legislative framework, and I can't actually not mention what you said, but this manipulation with electoral rules just before the elections were about to be called, changing the election rules like a week before calling the elections, and changing the whole environment basically in which the election game would take place, is again something that we can maybe discuss. Is it also a part of like manipulating the elections, manipulating information on elections or not? And this actually brings us to this institutional and institutional resiliency topic. So given Romania's experience of being a member of the European Union, how would you evaluate the election administration preparedness and electoral actor preparedness or awareness of these threats, this undemocratic, malign interference, whether from the inside the country or outside the country?
I would connect to what Vujo said earlier about this shift in where elections take place, because to be fair, probably in most European countries, elections take place online. So they're very, I don't know, even the contact with the voter is less and less present. So I think there's a new actor, apart from the institutions themselves, which are the big platforms. So probably most of the campaigns are there. And apart from the institutions, which I don't know, might be the oversight body, might be even the police, so it depends on the country, we expect them to solve our issues, to decide what's good and what's bad. And I think this is kind of an issue, and this is what is now discussed as a EU level with a new regulation. Where is the responsibility of these platforms to block or to verify or to what do they do with the content? Because institutions in most cases, and again, if we look in Europe, there are very different types of administrations. Some are weaker, some are stronger. And firstly, I don't think it's just the job of the election management body. Because if we talk about this kind of disinformation, you also have the telecom regulators. You have other types of institutions which might have a role in somehow trying to keep control of this behavior. Regarding Romania, I think we are not in the best position, so probably I don't know if you are a very good example in this. I think we're probably where most countries are, in the sense we try to deal with these kind of new behaviors with old rules, in the sense that what we apply for offline, we also try to apply to online. And I think it also goes into a logic that we tried mostly to see if the expenses are okay, but less monitoring of the real activity. So I think the issue with Romanian elections generally, and I think it's also outside the elections, because I agree completely that you don't impact elections only on election day. You build this kind of behavior. So I think the issue is that we don't necessarily look into the content of this electoral thing. And I think also you pointed out a very interesting topic I also wanted to mention. I don't think we are a unique case in Europe. I know other countries who have this kind of behavior, but since a few years ago, political parties receive very high sums of money from subsidies, from state subsidies, around 50 million euros per year, which is quite a high sum, one of the highest in Europe per capita. And what they do, around 70, 80, 90%, depends on the year and the party, they spend on media. So basically they buy media. It's totally untransparent, so you don't know who got the money. And you see articles which are very positive about the government. The government is great. But you don't know if that's organic or it's paid. Of course, it's paid. The issue is that you don't know that it's paid. So I think in combination with this uncontrolled online environment, you have the, let's say, traditional media, which is bought by the government, and you have weak control institutions who only check from some contracts if they're okay or not. This seems to be the kind of recipe for disaster. Mm-hmm. Only one thing I want to mention is at EU level, there's a new regulation being prepared on political advertising and ads targeting. Yesterday, I think it was the last trialogue, so the discussion between the three institutions to negotiate. And what will we hope this will push, would be more transparency on political advertising. So each advertising should be published, should be tagged, and most important, we should know who sponsored it, because we cannot cut the message part from the money. We need to know who paid for the message.
Yeah, sure. I just want to now ask Yana whether this would be something that you also, it seems like when we talk about manipulation, we always talk about the digital sphere, about the campaigning, which is of course the most, wide channel actually to reach the audience, etc. But we mentioned these institutional and government manipulations with the dates, with the legislative framework, with the other things. There are also fake observation missions, which Vujo tackled, and Septimius as well, but we're going to talk about it a little bit later. So in Ukraine and from the Ukrainian perspective and experience, what are the most influential channels or more suitable channels for those who intend to manipulate elections to do it?
I think it's also digital.
It's
not
digital.
Not law, not government,
Okay.
but also digital. The platform where everyone can, and now cheaper than before because of AI, can manipulate and and spread untruthful information. I would like to share with you some data about Ukraine and about the situation with social media. One moment. From September 2019 to December 2021, over 100 accounts in Ukraine were blocked, and also almost 900 Facebook pages and groups created inside Ukraine had been closed, linked to Ukrainian political figures and tried to influence political opinion. During the recent presidential, parliament and local election, Facebook found and blocked in Ukraine at least 6 major networks of pages and accounts administrated from Russia and tried to influence the internal situation in Ukrainian agenda. Unfortunately, the use of bots and networks of pages of campaigning during election is not prohibited, and so we can identify them. We have resources to show them, but it's much harder for us to bring these messages to officials and to tech companies. And now our pain is Messenger Telegram. It's very popular in Ukraine, Ukraine inside, and in Ukrainians who are now living abroad because of the war. Our recent sociological survey show that more than 78% of Ukrainians used Telegram. So it will become a key campaign platform during the next election. But Telegram is about non-transparency procedures for collecting data and users' data, a non-transparent mechanism of how to block, how to moderate content. And there are a lot of disinformation and untruthful information on Telegram. Unfortunately, right now we see how Russia spread manipulation on temporary occupied territory about pseudo-election that they held now. Our Ukrainian legislative doesn't regulate the situation with social media. Only on the beginning of this year, we adopted a new law of media, but they excluded the amendment about political agitation from the final text. And now it's also a draft, but it's very necessary because we are speaking about political advertising and political with a very I don't know how to explain.
It's okay. We can, I mean, I can share the experience from Serbia, and sorry for taking too much of the floor, but we know about the situation with Telegram and how much it is consumed and the main source of, the main channel for exchange in Ukraine, and the fact that, you know, like here in in Serbia, for example, the TV is the most influential channel through which citizens get information about political events and get informed. So basically, you know, like what we would be more interested to know about is whether Telegram actually writes scenarios for all these TV programs on the national that are broadcasting nationally to actually develop and further this kind of anti-West and anti-democratic propaganda. But maybe it would be good, as we're not going to have much time soon, basically to go back to the principles of the election observation as such, and what it can do, or how it can be also abused in this sense. So, Vujo, could you comment on the phenomenon of the fake observers, fake election observation missions, which we are also seeing now in the past election cycles that are actually getting accreditation in front of our election management bodies, and then we don't know what they do. And yeah, what is their purpose of getting accredited to observe the elections? So we don't see their effects, but maybe there are, but we just don't see. So please, could you give us?
We have suspicions, but we don't really see the operation. So I think it's also part of a wider problem, and the problem is that pretty much every country in the world has some kind of elections these days. Everybody checks the boxes, but it's really a big question whether these elections are genuine, as we would call them, and we need to take elections as part of a constant negotiation about legitimacy of the elections. It's taken for granted, and even in consolidated democracy, as we've seen in the United States with insurrection in Washington, the consensus can break down, and so nobody's really safe from this. And I think that election observation can play a major role in this negotiation about the legitimacy of elections, and its scope has increased in the last years. Like it really matters, not only looking at the election day, but also looking at the period before the election day. So the scope of election observation has changed as the forms of manipulation of elections has also changed over time. And I think what CRTA is doing, for instance, it also adapted to this. So we are interested in the outcome of the election, not in terms of who wins. We should be impartial, but we need to verify what happens on election day. But what we also started looking more and more is what is the quality of the process. And so there are two things that we actually look at: the quality of the process, and we're looking whether we can verify the election outcome. And so, for example, in 2022, CRTA had like two big statements. One statement was that these elections have been unfair. There's been an uneven playing field, which meant that it was criticized by the authorities, and the opposition parties were basically supporting its findings. And then on the election day, our main report was that the votes. In general, the votes reflect the will of the voters as it was expressed on the election day. And then the government was saying, well, look, even CRTA recognized that the elections were okay, and then we were criticized by the opposition who thought that there was election fraud. So basically, I think our findings and how we observe elections are really reflecting well the type of regime in which we live in, where election day fraud is not that present, but elections are deeply unfair. But at the same time, it makes everybody unhappy, which means that both the government and the opposition have good reasons to scrutinize and to basically try to create the plurality of opinions by providing, another opinion. And this is what we've been seeing in the last couple of years, more and more. There are basically a couple of forms of what I would call inauthentic election observers. It's easy if you have like international organization which is clearly associated with a foreign power, for instance. I mean, you see what their interest could be. But the point is to create an appearance of independence and non-partisanship, but in reality, we know it's not the case. And so in the last couple of years, we had registered observers from a non-government organization which is registered in one of the United States states, which is like well known for having very loose legislation, and a lot of shell companies which actually engaged observers from Eastern Europe and Middle East, and we had no idea what's happening there. So we still don't know what that was. It's very easy to spot quasi-NGOs that the government is creating. And the third thing that we kind of didn't really hope seeing is that the opposition also makes their own, quasi-observers. And the point is, I would say, and I'll close with this, is that we haven't seen their effects, but I think that they're there and they're dormant. Mm-hmm. They have a role, but it's not it doesn't express itself in every election cycle. Going back to the author that I mentioned, Dov Levin, his finding of electoral interference was that it happens in the cases where some actors see their interests as being endangered in the country, and when elections are highly competitive. So when it's critical, there is a higher need for interference. And point two, they always need a domestic actor. So it's always partially an inside job. Foreign interference always has to have a domestic actor which will basically receive this so-called help. And then we're talking about the process of renegotiating, like whether these has been legitimate elections or not. And I think the main contribution is the appearance of pluralism. If genuine election observers say one thing, you need to have another, our observers that will say another thing.
Sure, and now I just want to just quickly ask Septimius and Yana whether you have some similar observations in Romania or in Ukraine before the full-scale invasion of these groups that were coming and trying to either mimic those actors that should play some of the roles in the election process, just to trying to fake, like gong organizations, etc.
Well, we didn't have quite a lot of international observers doing this. Usually there are international missions, so ODIHR or these kind of missions. We have our own. We are good at developing our own association. So basically, you have to be an NGO to observe elections in Romania, and political parties created these NGOs, and we know that some of them were even paid, which is illegal again. But the problem is, the problem is with them is that actually they don't produce anything, so it's not like they have an alternative report. They are just there to make sure that everything is good. So sometimes they can interfere in the process, which is problematic. But until this point, we haven't seen external interference. We know in other states there were even European members of the European Parliament which were paid by other states to be these kind of observers, fake observers, and have these kind of reports in the European Parliament. But with Romania, we like it locally. We don't export our our work.
Okay. Yeah.
We had both kinds, external and internal. External, I think most of all were organized by Russians to control Ukrainian agenda. It's a special institution located even in Europe, but coordinated of Russia. And internal fake observers, it's like not NGO, but media, because media also can be on polling station in Ukraine, and all the day of voting and during the night of calculation. And it's we call them also Titushka such world, because mostly it's very sports guys and with from newspapers of very interesting name, like maybe something about agriculture or something about sport, not about politics.
Yes, sure, I understand. So before we skip to the public, I would just like to ask you to just briefly, this is basically the main question and the toughest question that we always leave to the end, for the end, which is like what would be the first step to undertake when dealing with these kinds of threats? How to start building resilience that should actually bring more election integrity, strengthen the election integrity. If you could just reflect on that, although we would need a completely different new panel and a longer process to think about the solution. We are all aware of that. But yeah, if you have some
Okay,
thoughts,
so
from where
I
to
think,
start.
first of all, what I was saying earlier, I think sometimes it's above us. So I mean, when you have these huge companies which have become the playground for elections, I think they have a huge responsibility. And just to give you an example, which relates both to false campaign and to sponsorship, there was a recent investigation in Romania about a network of pages which were promoting Gazprom, and some of the sponsors, because you have to, if you pay for advertising, you have to declare your identity. And the name of the sponsor was ABCD, I don't know what. So you can imagine what's the level of control in I don't know when posting this. So. And I think it's even worse, I don't know, with TikTok or other probably Facebook and Google have made some steps, but you have TikTok, which is full of political advertising, which is not tagged as such. So I think first, the pressure, and I think it's mostly, I don't know, we are in the EU, I think it's the job of the Commission to push, because individually it's quite hard, each state, to go and talk to these companies. And I think some steps were made. Otherwise, there have been in the past years some very interesting investigative works by investigative journalists who found these kind of networks who are promoting, I don't know, the message of Russia or other. But I think it's very hard technically to see. It takes a lot of time. And even if these pages are put down, I think there are 5,000 more others who appear. So I think basically this is one of the paths, and I think there is, but this is a political will to invest national authorities with the will and resources to do this. But this is a tricky one.
Yes, it is. I know. Thank you. Yana, please.
Okay. I absolutely agree with Septimius about the responsibility of tech companies and the ability of authorities to communicate with them, to ask to put their focus on small market, because tech companies look at USA or something like big market, but ignore little market that even don't have. In Ukraine, we hadn't Google Library open, only Facebook, only Meta instrument we can analyze. What can we do? Be careful and study cases from other practice, only to understand what can happen on our next election.
Yes. And
it's study cases.
Yes, that definitely. I mean, and that's the idea behind the panel, actually, to hear the experience and to start studying cases, because it's just a matter of time when some of our countries is going to face face these threats that are possibly going to become more relevant to what we have here. So,
yes, so I can just basically agree that the issue of false information during elections is a much wider issue, and it needs to be tackled in the same way that we are thinking about building resilience to false information in the first place. I think that the elections are just, high pressure points where the democratic consensus can break down and then becomes a security issue, and we've seen how this happens. So this is why it's so important to focus on the elections. From the point of election observers, I think one of the things that we could contribute is to help the public realize that election observers too can be vectors of false information. They're not usually seen as such. When we talk about false information, these are not common, let's say, vectors. And we need to learn how to recognize them. We need to learn how to, separate one from the other. Some of the ways that I've started seeing is that inauthentic domestic or international observers are much less transparent about their structure, about the people. They have usually very low capacity. In order to observe elections, it's a big undertaking. It takes hundreds or thousands of people. These are usually very small missions, and they also there's this capacity and there's a gap between what they can do and what they want to do. And so they're very, very interested in the outcomes. They are very rarely interested in the process. And when you put these couple of things together, it's kind of becoming easier to spot what their purpose could be. But it's still, like as we said, it's just reasons for suspicion. But I don't think it's being talked enough, especially as these issues are becoming more and more critical. We've seen in Bosnia, in the latest elections, in Republika Srpska, that the lack of domestic observers or international observers that did parallel vote tabulation was really an issue, because there was no consensus about who won these elections, and that could have turned into a much bigger problem than it was.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
just to add, I mean, domestic observation is not the international norm. International observation is, but domestic isn't. And this is also something that needs to be tackled on a wider level. On a EU level, some of the EU countries just don't recognize domestic observation as such. And this is something that we also need to talk about.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we know that case from Hungary, but also in other countries in the European Union. So we have around 15 minutes left until the end of our conversation. So I would like to invite the audience if there are any questions in relation to what we have just discussed when it comes to the elections, information manipulation. I see one in the back, the lady in white jacket.
Is it working? Yes, thank God. Hello, my name is Roberta Reducu. I'm representing New Strategy Center from Romania, and I wanted to ask you, I could see that there's active role playing in seeing and searching for these election meddlers, but how do we actually make politics and politicians see what's happening, and what are the measures that are taken into preventing these meddlers to further affect the elections? Thank you.
Okay. I would like to ask whether there is an additional question to, or maybe later. So I guess this question was intended to all of the panelists. So please, anyone who would like to answer, to reflect.
Okay, I'll try. So I think politicians are the main cause for this. So it's not like they don't understand. I mean, I probably in most countries, which we already discussed, political parties are responsible for these campaigns. I think our role, and also of international observation, and I think this is very important, is to put pressure on states to improve how they organize elections and how the rules look like. Of course, I mean, an international observation mission cannot tell to a party what to write in the statute, but can at least underline that there is an issue and that things need to be improved. Because first of all, there are some international standards, there are some international practice to which countries have adhered. So in theory, of course, you have to follow them. And secondly, I think it's our role to put pressure on political parties to improve their behavior. And I will say, thirdly, the role of the media. But if the media is bought by political parties, it's quite hard to write against your master. So I would think it's, and of course, we like to think that is the role of the citizens. But often citizens, you know, they express only during the election day, or I don't know, during a protest or something. So of course, I think there is need of pressure from both this upper, I don't know, level, and also from grassroots. I think political parties themselves don't change that easily from, I don't know, their own initiative.
Yeah.
what else? Advocate changes in legislative, maybe for more clear procedures and punishment for those who use this scheme, who use disinformation and who are not clear, whose campaign is not clear.
Yeah, I can agree to what's been said. That I don't think it's an issue of awareness by politicians. As I was saying, politicians or political parties and their representatives are one of the main sources of false information in the region and wider. So and I agree, it's very difficult to always talk about citizen awareness and so on. But actually, we can see some movements. We can see that if domestic observers and media pay attention to what is happening around the electoral cycle, and actually try to develop a little bit of new understanding or better understanding, and to develop a new vocabulary of what's wrong with the elections. In Serbia, we've been stuck with the main electoral irregularity being electoral day fraud. Whether elections are stolen or not, it's not the main issue, and it really needs to be repeated over and over again. And we can actually see we did a couple of surveys last year, before and after the electoral process, where we saw that citizens had expectation, or the public had expectations that the elections will be, that there will be election day fraud, and after the elections, less people actually thought that there was fraud. So, and I think it's part of domestic observers and NGO and media to basically point to where the problem actually is with our elections. Not so much on the election day, even though I don't say they're perfect, they can always break down.
No, yes, of course, but
to develop a more complex understanding. And politicians can sometimes be allies in this, but most often they're not.
I just wanted to give you an example, a very concrete example. So in 2019, we had EU elections, and we have an electronic system regarding which checks for double voting. Basically, it checks the identity of the voter, and it's used also to publish online participation, turnout, and also for tabulation. And one of the political parties tried to discredit it, because this is, I think, one of the main risks of this kind of information, to destroy institutions, because if people don't trust institutions, you don't trust results. And I think it's not just in Romania, you see it in many countries. Sometimes it's the parties in power, sometimes there are other parties. And the purpose was to discredit, saying that the results were not okay due to this system, although it's probably one of the most transparent in Europe, because you can see all the stages of the protocols, from the picture, what was in the polling station, until the end. So you see all the stages online. And basically we had, back then, I think we observed in quite a lot of polling stations, and we gathered data from the polling station. We have an app which we use, and we had a report saying that the application was fine from, thousands of observers. And I went to the parliament in the audience. So there was a commission in the parliament, and basically we managed to prove that it was impossible to change the results with that application, because it was not the role of application to count the votes, because this is what they were saying, count the votes. And basically the commission, after I think 1 year or 2 years, said, okay, it was not a fraud. But I think it really mattered. I mean, because we went to the media, our report was quoted in the media, it was not fraud. So in this case, it really mattered. So sometimes you really have this kind of success.
Yes, of course, you do. And I think that maybe the most, one of the examples that we can take from Serbia is this never-ending story with the voter registry that is actually the topic which is being maybe the most manipulated over the past election cycles so far. And the problem with it, especially because it is really close to citizens, so everyone understands what the voter registry means. But unfortunately, the state actually acts either, there is no political will. I mean, as Septimius mentioned on several occasions today, there is no political will, and there is basically ignorance towards even recognizing that the problem exists. So yes, I mean, politicians and the government, they are definitely, I mean, part of the problem. We have space for one more question from the audience, if there. Yes, please.
Thank you. Tom Countryman, a former American diplomat. First, I'll comment that all the issues you outlined, we have the same issues in the United States. And because Vladimir Putin's main hope in Ukraine is that somehow his ally and equal, Donald Trump, returns to the White House, I expect massive Russian disinformation in the United States over the next year. Also, have to agree that the main goal of at least one party in the United States is not to perfect electoral institutions, but to discredit them. So my question, 23 years ago, I watched with great admiration as NGOs throughout the region, but especially in Serbia, mobilized thousands of election day observers. I hear your point very well, Vujo, that it's not just election day, it's the whole process before. But my question is, are you able now in elections in Serbia, as well as in Ukraine and Romania, to mobilize enough volunteers to really cover every polling place? It's important in itself, but it's also important because that gives you the base from which to build concern about everything that happens before Election Day. Thanks.
Vujo?
Yeah. So that's a good question. It's a question of purpose of domestic observation, whether we can really, deliver what we promise. And it's also about management expectations. So election observers are not there to control the process. They're not there to influence the process. We are there to give some sort of unbiased assessment of how the election day went. And the way we do this is, in Serbia at least, the couple of NGOs that are doing this, that also did this back in 2000, is through parallel vote tabulation, so through observation of a systematic sample of polling stations. The methodology is such that we can infer about what happens on the country level, especially, given a margin of error. And I think this is a very, very meaningful exercise. And in some countries, it's impossible to observe, the whole. Think of Turkey. I think even Ukraine. It's simply not possible to observe all polling stations. And this is why we really do our best to develop our methodology and to explain it to people, because they can always say, yeah, but there are polling stations that you didn't observe. We know, and we try to explain what a sample is, what a sample-based observation is. I think really the political parties should be those that cover all polling stations, because they are the ones, when they nominate the polling board members, they are the ones who are actually responsible for the quality of voting on the election day. So election observers cannot do this. They don't have the capacity. And it's even a question whether it would be better if we observed all the places. I think it's actually better to observe on a sample. And so we do different things. Political parties should be those that cover, candidates or lists, that cover all the polling stations, that control and that fight for every single vote there. They have the means. The observers are there to give an assessment of what happened. So the roles are different, and I think expecting of any election observers to cover all the polling stations in a proper way, I think it's overambitious. We would be promising something that we cannot really do. But, different roles, and, perhaps that can actually help in securing that election day goes well. In Serbia, we have a couple of critical elections this year / next year, we don't know still when, which might be some of the, elections where sides could be, equally split, and I think observing an election day will be very important in the next couple of months.
Septimius, you want to reflect, or you're just signaling to Vujo?
Okay, okay, I'll try. We do not cover all the polling stations from multiple reasons. There are 18,000 in Romania, and we are a team of 10 people, so it's not doable. We work exclusively with volunteers. We don't pay our observers, and we have 4 elections next year. So it would be kind of crazy to try to multiply 18,000. But I think we take it. We have the same philosophy of covering samples. We don't go only to bad polling stations because you have this tendency of going to where bad things happen, but you try to see everything because for us, data collection and trying to have conclusion, I think is more important. And what we do is we also focus quite a lot on the rest of the process, on political finance, on political advertising, on the campaign itself, monitoring the institutions. So somehow ensuring that things are fine for the election day, because to be fair, I don't think for us election day frauds, apart maybe from local elections, which everywhere are probably the most contested. For us, I don't feel that now this is a critical issue. For us, the issue is media buying and this kind of political advertising, unequal playground with huge sums of subsidies. So what we try to do is to prevent the election day being built on an uneven field.
Yes, fully agree.
Okay, Ukraine.
Sorry, Yana, could you just also maybe mention what to expect from the next Ukraine elections? I mean, not to expect in a sense of outcomes, but how they can actually take place and when. I know that you had an appeal not to have elections during the wartime, but could you just briefly reflect on that as well?
Okay, yes, sure. Election in Ukraine can be only after the war is over. Election and full-scale invasion is possible to get better together. As observers, we should do absolutely new structure of this future observation for the first post-war election, because a lot of voters in Ukraine, from Ukraine now living abroad. A lot of voters are in army, in militaries who are in the line. And a lot of people from eastern part and southern part of Ukraine changed their place and living now in western or in central Ukraine. Also, it's about media, because now we have Єдиний марафон, unit marathon, that's promote only one position, and another, not pro-government political actors. They need the field to make their campaign, not only social media, but some else.
Okay,
and also, election is about safety, it's about security. We can organize them with sirens and to gather a lot of people together in polling station.
Of course, it's definitely the matter of human security. But like in our context, that is not what you have there. Is about actually the democracy and not destroying or harming this legitimacy and the democratic character of the elections that could potentially lead us to that could potentially destabilize the society and the state as such. So we are running out of time, and we ran out of time. I would like to thank the panelists for great interventions and great inputs. Thank you, the audience. So hope to see you again and to delve in more details when it comes to the election and election information manipulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.